Hi, everyone. Welcome to Optimized for Humans. My name is Usha. I'm an executive coach and consultant. And in this podcast, we have conversations with leaders exploring what AI adoption looks like and how we can actually build workplaces that work for humans and strategically leverage AI for the rest. Today, I'm speaking with Bryant Vitanza, who's the COO of Mission, a category leader in cooling hats, towels, and accessories. He's also the founder of Farley Brook Consulting, where he partners with boards and executive teams to connect the dots between technology, people, and business to help them achieve meaningful transformation. Brian, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Usha. It's great. I know the conversations leading up to this have been amazing, and I'm super happy to kind of have this conversation and be able to share it.
Well, the first place I want to start our conversation is one of the things I think is really unique about you is you've led change and kind of been in these critical roles across small and large organizations. And I'd love to learn from you around what have you seen around implementing AI specifically across small and medium and large organizations, and what have you seen as the differences?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time, and I've been in and out of these technology transformations for the better part of 20 years, and a lot of that was the move to the cloud and SaaS solutions and how they were driving optimization and efficiencies and the predecessor to AI like robotic process automation and things like that, identifying efficiencies in organizations. But those were processes and projects that took 18 months to 2 years, to move from legacy systems to those. AI has kind of completely, thrown all that out in terms of it no longer takes a year or 2 years to implement a technology. You could implement technology within hours or a day, right? And so I've been at an interesting inflection point in that where my last organization, we were about 500 people just at the beginning of AI in terms of the chatbots and ChatGPT rolling out and some of the capabilities being implemented. And that was really interesting, right? You have people that are eager to try it. You have resources in the organization. And so really it comes down to, do you need governance depending on what type of industry? And we were able to leverage it in a few different ways from design. And so we were able to experiment in designing some products that we were potentially going to release. We use it a lot in technology. I think one of the early use cases that I found very helpful was coding and different development, and that has obviously come a long way in the last 2 years. But that was a really easy efficiency gain and or check on existing work in terms of coding. So I think the large organization, we have the resources, we could spend money, we can try things, we could spin up teams, focused on AI implementation or how use cases for AI was a big one. The small organization, which I am now, we have about 20 people, right? It's a much different situation, right? We obviously have less bureaucracy. There's less teams, there's less challenges with implementing technologies because you can get everyone in the room, you can have a quick conversation and you can move forward. I think our challenge is, resources, like how much can we invest in the technology, really dedicating the time it takes to understand the technology, so something like a chatbot, Claude, ChatGPT, Perplexity, we use those on a daily basis, but those are really part of the AI solution that's coming, and a small part, right? You're interacting with it from more of a chat perspective. We're more interested in, how can we leverage the technology in existing systems? So contract management is one that we use quite frequently as an early stage. Okay, we get a contract, want to review it. The solution we have has AI built right into it that you can actually ask it questions. And so it's an intermediary step before we go to legal counsel. We're using it in data analysis in Excel. There's a really cool tool Index, out of a Duke grad who started it, that does incredible analysis in Excel from a financial perspective. And so, think of 20-person team trying to sift through financials and years of data. This tool can do it in 2 minutes, and you can speak to it just like you would ChatGPT. And so in big organization, my last organization, that would have taken a little longer to get the CFO and the team on board with. this organization, finance is 3 people. I have a conversation with the CFO and we can start the next day. So I think it's really cool with how things are shifting so fast, and understanding your organization's capabilities in terms of adopting it, and there is some risk to that. So you need to understand the organization, what industry you're in, how much you can take on in terms of risk, or how to communicate with the organization, how they need to leverage these tools or communicate with these tools, and what information they can share and whatnot. But it is, I think really understanding organization size, how do you approach AI, and how do you really want to leverage it as an organization today, knowing it's going to be different a month from now, 6 months from now, and 12 months from now.
Yeah, what really stands out to me is I think in a smaller organization, you're able to be more scrappy. You're not bogged down by the bureaucracy in the same way. And so you actually have more space to experiment and try a bunch of things. And, you can kind of tweak processes and policies, and you can kind of feel what the guardrails are as you go,
Yep.
right? And in a way, you don't quite have the same luxury with a larger organization. I think there's more work that needs to be done centrally to kind of ensure what the guardrails are, so that each team can act like a small startup, lean kind of entity that does then, experiment and leverage the resources they do have available. So it's an interesting and different, like a varying challenge in both scenarios. But the other thing I wanted to point out is I love the way that you're really integrating it into the process. And you're thinking about it from like an end to end, like where can it actually augment the work and support. I think that's a really useful way for people to start thinking about it. And honestly, there's so many different tools out there right now. And a little bit of exploration can go a long way in actually supporting every part of the process. And I think it takes a lot of experimentation to really get a sense of like, is this helping me and shortening the time it takes me to complete something? Or is it actually just kind of it's taking me more time to check its work, or, yeah, there's just lots of, we just have to kind of play with it, right? To really know.
Yeah. No, like there's so much out there that, like, at some points I think it's overwhelming, but I do, I really love the concept of thinking of it as an assistant or like an agent, and how really do you want to interact with that on a daily basis, and what are the use cases personally and professionally that you can really leverage it for, and then identifying solutions that could potentially help you with that.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of zoom out for a second and just contextualize a little bit, like what are some of the challenges that you're facing as an organization? Like what's keeping you up at night in this moment, and kind of how AI may fit into that picture?
Yeah, I think, right, so obviously we're, consumer facing brand, we're in retail, we're on, Amazon, we have our own website, we have, a B2B arm. So a lot of what keeps me up at night is supply chain related, and how are we, getting product to our customers in the right time. Making sure that quality is there as well. I think AI, outside of all the macro and geopolitical challenges that we're facing right now, AI is a huge challenge, in just understanding how do we navigate it as a business, right? How is it impacting our Amazon business now that AI can, scrape large amounts of data? How do we get ahead of that? How can we navigate some of the challenges in terms of image generation that may impact our brand, or even internally in the company? A lot of, platforms that we use are leveraging AI. In some cases, it's great. In some cases, it's actually presenting challenges or risks to us as a brand. And do we understand what those are? And it's, getting back to, I think, where we first started, the digital first kind of revolution in SaaS solutions, it moved slow enough that you could get ahead of it, you could understand it. AI is moving so fast that it's really difficult for me, or I think any leader, even the ones that are living solely in the AI space, to understand everything that's happening and how quickly it's happening, right? It used to be, you get a monthly release on a technology. I'm getting updates to ChatGPT on a daily basis. I'm getting updates to my, SaaS solutions with AI features every day, and understanding how are they impacting day-to-day business. Are they presenting new risks? Are they going to help us? Are they going to, cause other issues in the market? Is really a huge challenge for me. So if anyone knows how to solve that, please reach out. But it's a really interesting time to, I think, be a leader in an organization and understand, how the landscape's changing due to AI.
Yeah, and I think another part of this challenge, as well as an opportunity in some ways, is I think from an operational perspective, it's a great place to leverage AI to like streamline things, make things go faster, have more precision,
Yep.
etc. And because of its like tendency to hallucinate, and because we're not quite there yet with the accuracy piece, it can also really complicate your life and
Yep.
create some costly mistakes in the process, right? So I imagine it's a challenging piece to navigate, because there's the temptation to outsource more of it to AI, and also it's an operation, like with operations, you have to like ensure end to end, accuracy, clarity,
Yep.
precision, all of those things, right? There's so many moving pieces that are all connected to each other that if it breaks in one place, it'll break throughout that.
100%. I think this, right, you used to build a process, and you knew what the inputs were and how the process worked, and ultimately what the outputs were. I think the one of the most frustrating things about AI, and you mentioned the hallucinations, is that it changes, right? We could use AI for one process one week, and they change the model, they tweak the model, and the next week it breaks, right? And to your point, you don't actually know what broke. Did you do something as the user? Did your
Right.
customers do something? Did the software do something? Or did the AI model change? Because obviously they don't know, like, OpenAI doesn't even know, ChatGPT, when they tweak a model, what the impacts are going to be, right? And that's why,
Right.
you'll see them keep refining it. And I think at some point there needs to be, an understanding of, well, this is a system critical process that can't be touched or can't be updated without some regression testing or some, validation. Because to your point, and this is where we're very sensitive at my current company of how we implement AI directly into those critical processes, because of the challenges that it presents. If something breaks, we're a small team, we can't just drop everything and have everyone focus on, figuring out what went wrong. Was it AI? Was it something else? And so it is, hallucinations aside, and like, how do you deal with that and understand what's true and what's not true? It's, the constant changes to these models. It works one week, doesn't work the next week. Maybe it works the following week. And, how can you
Yeah.
rely on, AI in those critical processes if it's constantly changing and you don't know if you can trust it or not?
Yeah, so I'm curious, how do you think about, what work should be sort of exclusively human, what work should be exclusively AI, and what needs to be a really tight partnership? Like when you think about your organization's work and your work, how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, I think, and I think this is the consensus around many, is, the uniquely human characteristics, I think, should stay, right? And I think like there is um, I think a shift back to the human connection. I think coming out of COVID and coming out of these very digital interactions, whether, it's over Zoom, and like finding opportunities to meet in person or communicate one-on-one, is really important. And I think like, in our company, we're looking at, uh, what is those uniquely human roles or tasks that we want, because we don't want AI to influence it for whatever reason, or we don't think AI can do the entire process as well as a human. And then subsequently, we look at AI, how it can supplement, how can it, data is a huge one for me. AI can sift through millions and millions and millions of rows of data that it would take me or someone else, weeks, right? And do I trust it? No. But does it, cut, 90% of the work down, and then I can vet it and gut check it and do some analysis of my own? Yes. And so I think it's, it's going to evolve, over the next year, 5 years, 10 years. But right now, I think we're looking to our teams and, people coming into the workforce to really think about, those human interactions and where is it really important in an organization. And again, getting back to this, agent assistant model, how can AI take on some of those tasks, recognizing I think there's very few end-to-end processes that AI can do without humans involved. And I think we're going to make a lot of mistakes as a society in terms of implementing AI and then pulling back. And so I think there's a lot of challenges that we need to face in figuring that out. But it's going to be an interesting time. And I think the more people communicate in terms of their concerns about AI or challenges of AI, the more dialogue we can have about, what are the right use cases and how do we avoid some of the pitfalls that we might fall into by over-relying on AI to replace human tasks.
Yeah, I really like that 90% frame, because there's something about like certain tasks, especially like a customer facing task.
Mm-hmm.
You need 100%, accuracy, precision, whatever you want to call it, right? You need someone to ensure that it's the absolute kind of best thing. And same for like operations. You can't have 90% accuracy, because if you break it in one place, you break the whole thing, right? But for things that are back end, like 90% accuracy with kind of pattern spotting around a data set, as an example. So I think that's a really useful frame for leaders to be thinking about. It's like, where can you risk 90% accuracy with a human to gut check, versus where do you actually need it to be 100%? And of course, we're fallible as humans, so we're not 100% either. But there's something about the number of times we've done something that we can get closer to that 100% mark, right?
100%, yeah, totally.
And I think this is a point in time. I think it'll be interesting to see how this changes, how the whole hallucination piece changes with AI and how accuracy changes over time. I know even just in the last year or two, ChatGPT's accuracy has really shifted. It's way better than it was before. It's still not 100% there, but it's made massive leaps. So I think it'll be interesting to see what that looks like and how that evolves. I'd love to learn a little bit more around what mindset do you think employees should adopt in terms of like navigating AI, especially the uncertainty and fear around that? And what advice do you have for people around building their own AI capability?
Yeah, I think, I'm a big believer kind of in the growth mindset. And, I think there's a quote that is one of my favorite quotes, especially applicable to this period, by Alvin Toffler. It goes something like, the illiterate of the 21st century is going to be those who can't unlearn, learn, and relearn. And I think it's really, really, really important for anyone, wherever they are in life right now, to recognize that the world's changing daily, right? AI is impacting every aspect of our lives. And if you look at, how you use it on a daily basis, and I use it for cooking now. I take pictures of my, pantry and ask it to, for recipes. I use it for working on my car, and it's pretty incredible how quickly you pick new habits up with this technology. But I know it's going to change in, 6 months. And so, you have to recognize that the ability to develop new habits, to look at technology not as a challenge that is working against you, but something that could work for you, is the only way I think we're going to be able to move forward. I think the education, from early education through college and even workforce training, needs to kind of revolve around that concept of being able to unlearn and relearn, skills, and adapt, skills that were relevant 100 years ago and 50 years ago and 20 years ago, but are no longer relevant or may not be relevant in a decade from now. And there's a lot that the education system can do to prepare the young kids, but I think, especially in the workforce, organizations need to recognize, and there's lots of buzzwords around change management, and figuring out organizations generally aren't successful at that. They see it as a nice to have, or don't really recognize how to actually effectively implement a change management program. But I do think recognizing that you shouldn't expect employees to just one day, be able to navigate the challenges that AI is presenting, whether it's emotional, or, challenges around psychological safety, and not, feeling like you might have a job 6 months from now, but also how do you use AI effectively? So I think anyone trying to understand how to navigate this, I think the most important thing you can do is talk to others that are going through similar challenges, see how they're facing. I had a talk with someone yesterday, and they said they asked AI how to stop AI from stealing their job, which was a very interesting approach. But obviously AI is going to give you a pretty reasonable answer, and it did in this case. It said to find something that is uniquely human task, and so you have your trades like plumbers and electricians. It said, or be at the forefront of AI, so understand AI, whether you're implementing it or learning how to use AI most effectively, right? And I think there's very few jobs that AI will eliminate, and so really embracing it, and I would say be cautious. Don't just like embrace it, but really embrace it. Move forward with a growth mindset, and recognize like we are in a AI first world. Digital first is kind of in the past, and it's an AI first world, and it's gonna, whether you want it to come or not, it's here. And I think figuring out how to again embrace it in a way that you can be comfortable being uncomfortable is probably the best path forward.
Yeah, I think, there's such either or thinking around this. And I do think some of that is being driven by the ambition from, some leaders around like cutting costs and creating some efficiencies and cutting down headcount, and replacing it with AI. But I think the truth is like, it's the partnership that's actually going to yield the best results. And the more we can actually encourage people to find their own way around it, because this isn't just like learning a new technology where once you know how it works, that's it. This is really like leading people to this pool of like infinite possibilities. There's so many ways in which you can leverage this. And we're all discovering what are the possibilities, So I think there is something about encouraging that, but also recognizing that the best solutions, and actually the ones that are more growth oriented and innovation oriented, I think are going to be born out of that partnership. And the psychological safety, as you said, that needs to be part of that people can trust that as they're learning and innovating, it isn't a threat to their own kind of job security and whatnot. And I think there's also a world in which, we can reimagine the role of work in our lives, how much time we should be spending on it, and what that means from a security perspective and all of that. But, before we get to those conversations, I think it's worth for every leader to be thinking critically about how do you encourage your people to actually drive growth and innovation and multiply your revenue and profit, rather than this more narrow aperture around cost efficiency. And I don't think that's a bad exploration, but I think it needs to be in tandem with the growth conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
What advice do you have for leaders as they're thinking about AI adoption?
Yeah, and I think you kind of touched on it. I think if you're a leader looking at AI as a cost-cutting tool, you're not going to be able to leverage AI to the fullest extent, right? And I think you'll be able to identify processes or teams that you think AI can replace, and I think you may see some short-term gains from that. But I do think we are at our best with technology when we're working in unison, right? So you have people with diversity of thought, different perspectives coming together and leveraging AI And so I think fostering that environment is really, really critical. I don't think people understand how much subconsciously, like, we have context in our ability to connect the dots in a business, that AI, you can put something in and it'll give you a result. It'll give you a strategy. It'll give you the output you think you want. But it's really not, it doesn't understand your business. And some businesses that are AI first, you could argue, okay, well, it knows everything about the business, but I would still argue the human aspect of interacting with the AI is the unlock. And you know, giving your teams the resources to leverage AI versus looking at a cost cutting is going to, and you touched on it, it's going to pay off tenfold in terms of, profit, revenue, and, longevity of your company. Because instead of, cutting your organization by 20% and then, 3-4 years from now realizing it probably wasn't the best idea, you have to figure out how to reallocate those resources, because you don't need to spend as much time on this, particular work, but you can move them towards more forward-looking strategic growth work. And so, any leader, again, looking at it just as a cost cutting, really think about why you're doing that, and is that the best decision for the business? And then secondly, like, how can you support your teams, the organization, in navigating AI, training them on how to use AI effectively, and ultimately helping them to understand what is the vision 3-5 years from now for your organization, and how do you think AI is going to help you get there, either faster or more effectively, or unlocking something that you didn't think was possible without AI.
Yeah, I want to also touch on that piece around context, and like how much of context is actually we're constantly absorbing as humans in this like non-verbal way, in a subconscious way. Like, we're actually processing a lot more information than we can handle with our conscious brain, right? And one of the things I want to touch on there as well, that we've spoken about briefly before, is these early in career roles. And actually the importance of those roles, because you may not need someone to be the data entry person, but they're not just entering data, right? They're also humans who are early in their career, who are absorbing the organization's context, right? What I know in my own life, like what I've learned in those early roles wasn't the like thing that was not the most salient thing, the thing that I was doing. That was pretty repetitive, pretty easy to automate, etc. But the organizational context and just like being in the world of work context that I learned, that I think we all have to have, is so critical. And there's this like gap we start to create by eliminating a lot of those roles.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge. I think one piece is, I'm not sure universities or high schools are preparing them to enter this new workforce, right? In terms of, we are very set in our ways of, you get a degree in this, discipline, and then you move into an entry-level role in that career field. And to your point, you kind of, you have to work your way up, and you kind of learn the hard way by doing some of that transactional work, but it's really important work in terms of establishing yourself, understanding, building relationships in an environment that's not really dependent on you being the sole execution of all the work, but that you're part of a team, working on that. And you have outliers, obviously, that are founder CEOs and excel, but I think it's going to be really difficult for organizations to do away with those roles, because I think we all have expectations, and myself included. When I hire someone, I want them to operate at a high level, and what we forget is where we started out, and whether it's a job you have in high school or an internship, you have to kind of establish yourself, and how do you work, and how do you communicate, and how do you learn, and how do you build those relationships. And very few people can come out of college, enter the workforce, and immediately excel and become leaders and confident in their voice. And I think this is something AI is really going to challenge us with, right? Because now you don't have to actually write an email. You can have AI draft the email for you, but you don't understand the person on the other side may interpret it a different way. And like, how do you start to establish these norms or etiquette that people learn the hard way by sending an email that someone got really mad at, and they had to go have a conversation to kind of smooth things over. So, it's interesting. It's very challenging, and I'm worried for the people entering the workforce. I have an 8-year-old daughter. I'm worried for her and what that's going to look like in 10, 15 years, and how do we as leaders, how do organizations and teachers prepare people, and I don't think removing entry-level positions is the answer. I think maybe you evolve that, and what does that become? And do they need to do all the entry-level work, or maybe, there's a balance? But I do think it's a really important part of the growth of individuals personally and professionally. And we need some way to evolve that if we're going to truly start resetting kind of what is the entry-level role coming into organization, and what is the expectation in terms of how they are immediately productive when they enter the workforce.
And I think we can possibly learn a lot from startups and smaller organizations around that, because you actually have people who, because just of the sheer size of the organization, have to put on a lot of different hats,
Yep.
right? And have to perform a lot of different functions. And it's very much this attitude of, there's a problem, we come together and figure out how to solve it. In a way that I think larger organizations, we've become so siloed, and
Yep.
it can become so bureaucratic that actually we lose the ability to be nimble and to change quickly. And there's something,
or to fail. I think there's this resistance. You can't fail. I think these startups recognize we may
there's
fail,
a real
but we're gonna
acceptance
try.
of that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to go back to some of those roots, and bring some of those mindsets into even larger organizations as well, to kind of start shifting what's possible. Because I think, again, the great thing that we do have ahead of us, I think, is this immense land of possibility. But all of our choices kind of move us in one direction or another. So it's an interesting world.
Yes, it is.
Bryant, my last question, just what's one piece of advice you have for another leader who's listening in?
Yeah, I think if you're a leader now, this is one of, I think, the most incredible times to be leading. Again, whether you're a coach of young professor or a professional leader, and really just figuring out how to support your team, I think is one of the most important things. This is something I struggle with as I try to support team members across generations and different skill sets and things like that. But I do think supporting and figuring out how to effectively navigate the changing environment with your team is the most important thing. And that's what's going to really set organizations apart, is the ones that are able to foster an environment where they can help their employees grow into an AI first world, are going to be the companies that you see accelerate over the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. I think the companies that don't put the effort, the leaders that don't put the effort in, are going to really struggle over the next 5 to 10 years and may not be relevant anymore, because they just weren't able to adapt themselves or bring their team along for the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be that uniquely human thing that we're going to need to continue to really engage in and energize. Bryant, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thanks for having me, and hopefully we can have it again.
Awesome.